All right, I'm gonna have to thinking about which way to orient the camera. Sorry. No, it's not gonna let me. Okay, never mind. Never mind. This is where we're gonna be. How is everybody? I'm gonna actually just open up this live also on my computer in the event that I am missing any comments. Hi. I've got no sound. Can anybody hear me? If you can hear me, can you... Oh, you're fine, Jill? If anybody can just comment that you can actually hear me, that would be lovely. You can. Okay, great. Thanks, Shelly. Hi, how is everybody doing? I am interested to hear why everyone's here today. I know I've been just promoting, that I'll be going through some tips and tricks on how to sew some curves specifically for circle bags. So I'm hoping this is helpful to everybody, but is anybody having very specific challenges that they would like me to address today? Just put them in the chat. That would be great. That would be super helpful. Okay. Thank you, Kathy. It sounds like everybody can hear me. I'm seeing all the comments. So I have my computer over here, so excuse me if I kind of go back and forth between camera that you can see and computer over here that I'm looking at. Okay, so I hope everyone is having a really good weekend. I have a few things planned for us. I'm not going to go through it and like sew a bunch of stuff unless you really think that's going to be helpful at any point in time. I'm bad at binding curved seams. I'm actually going to write these down. Give me a second. Okay, so we'll talk about the binding. I did have part of that on my list too, but I'll make sure I definitely highlight that. Anything else, just let me know. I'll keep a little list going. I'm distracted by the cute thread on my machine. Oh, this is Amon Strong Bond 70. I think it's Tech 70. It's a rainbow variegated thread. I get this from Waywak. I think that's how to pronounce their company, W-A-W-A-K, them. They ship within like a day or two normally. In the US, they're, I believe, a small business. I think they're family owned. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think I don't remember where Amon is based out of. I don't know, but here in the US, we can get it pretty readily. I'm not sure about anywhere else around the world. Okay. So a couple of things before we get started. One is I want to make sure everybody is well aware of the K.Azcona Creates Circle Bag Challenge. There is a circle bag challenge happening within the K.Azcona Facebook group. I am judging along with two others, Amber McLean and Emma Brassfield. So we are super excited about judging bags. I don't like to judge in general because I think everyone's creations are amazing. Something's happening with my phone. But I'm really excited to see everyone's creations, so I can't wait to see them. The other thing is I do want to also just make sure that I tell you now before I forget that in addition to just helping you with some tips and tricks through this live, the other thing that I'm going to try to do is I'm going to give you a free pattern. Okay, well, let's not call it a pattern. Let's call it pattern pieces. So I created like a really quick little, it's pretty narrow, circle bag for you to play with. This is just a prototype of the bag, so it's not perfect, but my curves are still pretty good. This is made out of it's a waterproof cotton canvas. This one is from J&R Edwards. So this will be completely free. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you all the pattern pieces. This is called the emo bag. Why? Because you're also getting appliques to make it into different things, so different faces. So there'll be a happy face, a sad face right now, maybe more faces, I don't know. But you can make this out of any material. So I'm going to give this to you for free. I have all the pattern pieces created. I just haven't posted it on my website yet. So I will make sure that I post the link in my Facebook group. So there will be a charge for the pattern if you're not in my Facebook group. If you go on the site, you try to purchase this, I forget how much I'm charging. But if you go to my Facebook group, you're going to find a code in there once I post it to my site. So you'll be able to download it for free. So you'll be able to practice with this. Again, it's pattern pieces only. There's no written instructions. There's none of that. But there are PDF pieces and SVG file pieces if you want to cut it out in your Cricut or your Silhouette machine, whatever cutting machine you like to use. And I will be filming a video of how to put it together. So I know we're going to talk about some things today, and I'll try to show you maybe a couple of things too, but in general, that's going to be the video to watch if you want to see how to put this one together. And you'll see me utilizing some of the tips that I like to use to get really, really nice tight curves like this. So this was stabilized with self-adhesive foam from Fabric Therapy and also Decaville Light. So I used both on this one. The foam, I'm thinking how I did it. So the foam for the gusset was applied after I did Decaville, and I put the foam, I didn't attach the foam to this front and back piece. I think I used Naked Foam. It's the Pellon Naked Foam. And then I put my Decaville, mostly because I wanted kind of a smooth, flat surface. And sometimes Decaville can wrinkle things. So I just was very cautious. Okay, so this is one of the things that I wanted to mention before we get started. All right, so I'm gonna size it up for a golf disc bag would be great, Shelly. Oh, that'd be cute. Okay, so I just wanted to show you this bag. So this is the result that I get with a waterproof cotton canvas. This one's from J&R Edwards, and it's just like any other cotton canvas, only it's waterproof or water resistant. I can't remember which they call it. I think it's water resistant. But you can still get pretty tight curves on this. The other one I wanted to show you, I only had a couple of these like in my house still. Everything else is sold or given away. This is another one. So this is made with vinyl. Okay, so just as we talk about materials for a circle bag, I know everybody gets really excited and wants to make like gorgeous, all vinyl, professional looking bags. I would not start with this. I would advise against starting with vinyl. Practice with something that's a little bit easier for your machine. You know, I'm getting really smooth seams here, but I'm really comfortable, you know, sewing curves. This was not my first time, right? And I think I tend to get super excited about new patterns and new techniques, and I go all in, and then I regret it because it looks horrible. So, you know, take a look at, you know, materials that are going to work better for you. Thinner vinyls would work well, just nothing stretchy. Make sure it's not super stretchy. And really, you know, as you look at waterproof canvas, there's a lot of really pretty waterproof canvas prints. You know, practice with a lot of those first. That would be my advice, is really, you know, think about the materials. If you're going to use cotton woven, keep in mind that these are structured bags, okay? You need the structure around this part. Cotton woven is very thin. If you're going to use cotton woven, I highly suggest you interface it and use a couple of different stabilizers, which is why I use 2 on this. Okay, so I didn't interface my my waterproof cotton canvas here because it is already thick, but I did use two stabilizers, and it's nice and, you know, it has some really good structure to it because it's on the thinner side. With vinyl, I don't do that. You know, with vinyl, I will normally, like this is one that I have cut out of this bag. So this is just a piece of vinyl. And I used a piece of, it's called Profuse Stiff. I'm playing with it. It's supposed to be the equivalent of a Decaville Light. So I just got this from Waywack and I'm experimenting. But this gives it really nice structure, but it's still a little malleable. And you definitely want to keep your stabilizers out of your seams. I know this, pattern designers say this all the time, to keep the stabilizer out of the seams so it's easier to sew. I really, 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 really advise it for circle bags, because the way that these are sewn, because they are curved, you need some give, especially if your stitches aren't super perfect. You need a little bit of give. So would you suggest Decaville Light or something similar with sewing cork? I always stabilize my cork. So I like to use the higher end corks. They're great. I still stabilize them. If I'm not adhering the stabilizer directly to the cork with like double-sided tape or a spray adhesive, I will put a little bit of glue, but I don't use a heat press for them, for cork. I get really scared of heating cork up too much. I don't know why, but I do. So I tend to use like double-sided tape just to keep like the stabilizer in place, or some spray adhesive. But certainly, if you're more experienced using cork and you feel comfortable with the heat press, definitely try adhering it to the cork. I personally think that it's helpful. Not a lot of people like really stiff bags though. If you like the really super structured bags, Decaville Light's the way to go on cork. I would still add it. Because like I said, I double up stabilizer on a lot of my bags because I like super structured bags. It depends on the feel that you want. I think with cork, because of the way the cork is structured, and it's pliable, but certain types of cork can crack. So I'm just really, really careful about it. That's all. Yeah, I love the structured look. I think it's really, really pretty. Oh, you usually do Decaville Light too? Yeah. I love the look of Decaville Light. I just don't like that it can wrinkle things like cotton woven. And it really bothers me. So I'm trying this other one out to see how that works out. Okay, so here's the first like real tip I'm gonna give you that I think is more actionable. When you are, here, and I'll kind of show you on this one. When you are putting your gusset together, so you're gonna have a gusset here, the bottom part of your gusset, and then you're gonna have the part where the zipper is. And you're going to put all that together and start to fit your circle around, or your circle piece in with the gusset. The one thing that you can do before you start sewing is, when you have your piece, your gusset piece, and you put your lining on it, you can draw your seam allowance. I know that sounds weird, but the way that I sew my bag is like, let me actually just tilt this down. So when I sew my bag, I'm sewing like this. So the bottom part of my bag is down on my machine bed, and I'm stitching on my gusset. Okay, so this is all, let's turn this the other way. I'll show you. Let's see if this makes more sense. Okay, so if you have your wrong side of your gusset, your top and your bottom, I lay mine flat and I stitch along the edge here. So because of that, what you can do is, if this is your piece, you can draw your seam allowance before you stitch. So if you have like a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, I would just take a pen and draw 1/4 of an inch away from the edge all the way around your gusset prior to you clipping your front and back panel on. That way, when you are stitching and this is facing your machine bed and it's laying kind of flat like this, you're stitching right over that seam allowance, or that line that you drew. That's kind of how I started doing more structured bags to make sure that I could get like exactly the stitch that I need, exactly where I need to stitch. And I could see that very easily. So drawing your seam allowance, do it. I say do it. Do it until you get really comfortable, until you can kind of judge things. It will help a lot. It helps you to practice as well, and helps you kind of your eye spot exactly where you need to stitch later when you're not drawing. I was thinking that if you cut with a Cricut, you could have it drawn on the seam allowance too. So it depends, Nancy. So if you're going to put a lining in your bag, so this is lined with a waterproof canvas. If you go to draw, like you're cutting this out, and the Cricut draws the seam allowance on, you're not going to see it if you're going to use a lining. So if you're using a lining, you actually want to draw on the lining. Does that make sense? So, you know, because that's where you're going to see the line when you stitch. So you might need to, if you're cutting out your waterproof canvas with your Cricut or your cutting machine, you could certainly do that, maybe with like a metallic pen or something that would show up, or a marker. That could work. So I think any way that you want to do it, just keep in mind it will need to be on the lining side. So whatever you're using for your lining is what I would recommend you draw it on. I was just using this for demonstration purposes. Yeah. Okay, so that's one thing. So don't be scared to draw your seam allowance on. The other thing that I wanted to mention is, you know, attaching your circles to your gusset so that things don't shift. I think the hardest thing that I find when I sew curves is things tend to slip. So when I'm trying to stitch around my circle, you know, things can shift and then I get kind of wonky edges or wonky like stitches. So there's a couple of things you can do about that. I tend to overdo a lot of things to make sure things stay exactly perfect when I'm stitching. And this goes for any structured bag, I would say. Think about a couple of ways to keep your pieces together. One way is you could, when you go to attach your gusset to your circle, you know, a lot of people are clipping, right? And you kind of clip all the way around, you know, and that's fine. But like I mentioned, when you go to like sew this, it's possible that when you have this laying down, things are going to shift, things are going to move, and you're going to end up with things that look like this, right? And now it's not going to be the perfect shape that you want it, and it's going to look kind of wavy, and it may not be exactly what you want. So in order to keep this in place, there's a few things you can do. One is you can use double-sided tape. I know a lot of people don't like double-sided tape. I happen to love double-sided tape. I don't know if Beth's on here, but she didn't like double-sided tape. You know, and I use two different kinds. One is from Weft and Warp. So they make a great double-sided tape. My machine is fine sewing through their tape. So if you're concerned about, you know, whether or not your needle's going to stick, Weft and Warp is the way to go. If you're like me and you want something as strong as super glue because you don't want this baby moving anywhere, get the hyper stick tape from Waywack. I know this is like a Waywack commercial, but they have like super strong tape. And get the 1/8 inch. So I think either way you go, I highly advise 1/8 of an inch, because 1/8 of an inch you can keep out of your seam allowance somewhat. If you're basting around your circle, you still might hit it, which is why I'm saying maybe decide which tape you want to use, but you can tape it. So if you tape, you know, in between here, in between, you know, your gusset piece and your circle, and you get it to stick, then you can go ahead and stitch and you'll be fine. If you happen to get tape on your needle, the adhesive, and it gets all sticky, alcohol pads like alcohol prep pads that you can get at like Amazon, CVS, Walmart, any place. Just wipe your needle down. I keep a bunch of them here next to my machine. Wipe your needle down and keep going. It'll take all the sticky residue off. So I tend to check my needle every now and then when I'm stitching, just to see if it's tacky at all. So these are going to be your friends when you're using double-sided tape. The other thing you can do too is the Dollar Tree. Yeah, Dollar Tree has them, Shelly. Yeah, a lot of places have alcohol prep pads. The other thing I would advise doing, if you're not into like the double-sided tape, even if you are, you might still want to use these, are hemostats. These. So these are locking hemostats. So they're like scissors. Okay, so they're not just for medical use, they're for sewing too. So something really, I got these from Jolie Creations, and you can actually get them engraved too. I think I just put K.Azcona, so you can see that. So when you're stitching, you can actually use these to kind of clamp the pieces and lock them as you're sewing. These will hold a lot stronger than clips. So you can keep unlocking and keep moving all the way down and as you're sewing. So these are like a great tool to help you keep all the layers together. I think the main reason people have trouble sewing curves is because things shift a lot, which is why I'm really emphasizing ways to keep the layers together. My favorite part of this, what was the tape brand again? Okay, so the two tape brands that I like. This one is from Weft and Warp. So weftandwarpco.com, I think is what it's called. I'll try to post like a list of where I get all the supplies. This is the stickier one is from Wawak. It's WAWAK.com. And this is called Hyper Stick Tape. So this is the super sticky tape. This one, your needle can go, at least my needle can go through the tape, and I don't really have issues with my needle getting really sticky. So I think it depends on the needle that you're using. Some people like to use, it's like a non-stick needle, but I think it's like a universal needle. So it might not be good for like vinyl, but there's also non-stick needles too. I think that's more for like cotton woven, that kind of thing. Yes, Hyperstick is the best thing ever. It really is. It's awesome. Hey, Jessica. Okay, so, okay, we're gonna come down to my favorite thing in the whole wide world of how I do this. All right, you're gonna need a couple things. Well, maybe just, I don't know. Okay, I staple. I staple my seams. I think that's the easiest thing to do. It is an extra step. It's actually an extra 2 steps because you have to remove the staples, but I don't have to mess with tape. I don't have to, in general, mess with hemostats too much. Sometimes it still shifts a little depending on the size of staple I use in the area that I'm stitching. With circles, really a standard stapler is fine, but I use, it's called, this is just an Amazon Basics. Yeah, it's an Amazon Basics. It's called a plier stapler. So anything that I'm mentioning from Amazon, I do have an Amazon store where I put all of my favorite things. In the description of this video, you will find a link to my Amazon store. And I want to say this is under, I don't know, I have it categorized. I want to say it's under adhesives. I don't know. You can find this there, but so the link is there. So this is really cheap. I want to say I paid less than like $9 for it, but it's a plier stapler. And why a plier stapler? It can get really hard to use a regular stapler to staple your seams. So I like to staple within the seam allowance. So when I say that, it's about 1/8 of an inch to 1/16 of an inch away, like this. And I staple all the way around. I staple my gusset to the circle. Now, there is another kind of stapler you can use. This is a Tim Holtz stapler, and it's this little mini stapler. So the staples are way smaller You can see the width of this than a regular standard stapler. I use this for really small areas. And again, I got this on Amazon. I don't remember how much this was. This was more expensive than this, but these are itty bitty staples. Just keep in mind that with the smaller stapler, it also means the width is shorter, but the length is also shorter. I love oh wait, I missed something. I love hyperstick tape in combo with the non-stick needles. I use them for vinyl. Oh, do you? I wasn't sure how it worked with vinyl. You just can't get your head around moving the stapler, so I'm going to show you in a second. I need something easy on the wrist. Okay, so heads up, I have chronic pain. So everything I do is to alleviate pain on my body, which is also why I like the plier stapler. The regular stapler, the way I had to like press it with my hand was honestly painful, and I couldn't see as well of where to staple. This I have no problem with. This is easier. It flexes easier. I don't have to press it down as much. It's very little pressure on my hands. I do take breaks because of the nature of the pain that I'm in. So I think plier staplers might be helpful for you if you deal with any of that. I use an A5, which makes a smaller staple. I think it's great for tight curves. That's maybe what this is. I'm not sure what size staples these are. Hold on, I brought the staples with me. It doesn't say it's these, but I don't see I don't see a size, but that might be what these are. I'm not sure. Please tell us the directions we should be, the direction we should be stapling. I've tried. So here's what I tend to do. If I'm going to be sewing with the circle facing the bed of my machine, okay, and my gusset is up this way, I staple this way so that the top of my staple is on top of the circle, because then you have the smooth part of that staple. Now when you on the bottom when you're sewing, and it doesn't scratch your machine bed. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So I did it kind of the wrong way when I was kind of demoing, but if I do it this way, ignore this other one, right? So now you have kind of that smooth surface, and that's what's going to be on the bed of your machine, and it's not going to scratch up your machine. So if you do it the other way that I had done in the first place, which is wrong, you know, you have these ridges, and it can, depending on your machine and how much you're pressing, it can scratch your machine a little bit. I'm on a metal plate. I don't have that issue, but just keep that in mind. It can also snag a little bit if you have the ridged side of your staple facing the bottom of the machine. It can catch on any type of openings or holes. Ask me how I know, because I got stuck once. Yeah, the Tim Holtz are the tiny ones. Also, using staples reduces the amount of pressure that you need to apply to hold layers together. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So Louise, I have a rotator cuff issue right now. I'm about to start physical therapy next week. So I have the same issue. So, you know, on top of all the pain, I just try to look for ways that I can alleviate any type of pressure I'm putting on things and effort that I need to make that involves my hands and my arms, shoulders, back. So all of these things are very helpful for anybody that also deals with chronic pain or other like physical issues. These are all the things that I do to kind of help myself. And I just take a lot of breaks too. So the other thing I want to mention, so I know taking out staples are a pain. Just get one of these. Hey, Cynthia, just get one of these. This is just a little Boss Stitch staple remover. It's not the claw one. Don't get the claw one. You want something like this, and it's pretty, you know, simple to do. All you're doing is sliding this part underneath, and you're popping the staple out. You're good. It is a pain in the neck. I'm not gonna lie. There's no way around it. Taking them out is horrible. I do not advise leaving them in. I know there's some people that like to leave the staples in because they're just gonna bind the edges. I don't like to do that. The staples over time can peek through. I just don't like it. This does fit into the tiny staple. Hold on. Let me show you. Okay, I'm gonna staple it with this tiny stapler. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna do both. I'm gonna do them next to each other so you can see the difference in the staples. Okay. So this is, I don't know if you can see that. So there's a tiny staple, and a regular staple. Okay, so that's the difference. And I do tend to, this is about the distance. That's about as far as I will ever staple. I normally staple right, I butt them up against each other in general for most bags. So this is actually spaced out for me. Because, you know, if you think about where it's actually putting pressure on those layers, it's kind of towards the ends. In that middle part, it's a little bit of a gap. So if this does tug, more than likely it's going to tug and it's going to pull kind of here in the middle to separate the layers. So that's why I put them super close to each other, just so I can at least, sometimes I overlap. If there's like a point, like in my heart bag at that V at the top and even at the bottom, that V, I will overlap my staples just to make sure that I have enough pressure at that point where it doesn't separate and it doesn't, you know, I don't have any issues when I'm sewing. Okay, so staple remover, both staples. Okay, so here's the little one, and that tip still fits. Oops, I'll let go. Shouldn't have let go. Okay, there we go. You see that? So this staple remover can remove the little staples too. Again, Amazon, I put it in my Amazon store if you need the link, but it comes out really easily. And this is magnetized, so it should come out, like, it's pretty easy to remove them. Gone. Okay, so usually I will just staple and I'm good and I sew, it's no big deal. I will, with some bags, I will tape, I will staple, and I will use hemostats in certain areas because I need to. Because again, I'm trying to keep these layers as flush as possible so they do not separate when I'm sewing. Okay, so that is holding all of those layers together. The other thing I wanted to mention as we're chatting is let's also talk about just clips in general. I'm not going to go like super deep into this. There's so many clips that you can be using for these things. But, you know, when you're putting this together, a lot of people like these plastic clips, which are perfectly fine. They're great. I use them all the time for thin layers. Same Tammy, I would much rather just remove the staples and be confident that my stitches are exactly where I need them to be and things are being held together perfectly. Your plastic clips are fine. I think I get frustrated when people talk about how they have these cheap plastic clips and they keep breaking on them, and even if they buy the expensive ones, they break. Well, yes, they're going to break because they're plastic. So I think the mistake a lot of people make when they are, you know, putting bags like this together is, you know, you have all your stabilizers, you have your linings, you have your vinyl, everything's a thick layer like this. I mean, take a look how thick this is, you know? This is thick. If I were to try to put like a plastic clip, I mean, it'll do it. It'll do it fine. Your problem is because it's plastic and because you're stressing the clip, you're going to start to get cracks in them. Once you start to get cracks in them, and sometimes you can't see it, that's when you have the breaks. So I break, I don't know how many clips, like this one broke the other day. Like the whole top part of it came off because there was some stress on the clip and it cracked and it broke. Because I, like a dummy, you know, used it to clip something really thick, and over time it started cracking and it broke. So, you know, when you're doing bags like this, and you want to make sure things are staying put, if you do use clips at all, especially when you put your binding on, I highly recommend these types of binder clips. So these are small mini binder clips. They are, here's the size comparison. So, you know, I think width-wise, you get a lot more of like a wider area to kind of hold in place your layers, which is nice. And they can, because they're metal, they're not going to crack like the plastic ones. However, it's possible over time they can weaken, or like these pieces can come out. You can just put them right back on, but they can weaken because you could still, again, be bending this metal inside part too much. But I like using these. So just a quick tip there in terms of like clipping, just in general with bag making. Get yourself some mini binder clips. I got mine from Amazon. I have a gazillion of them. I mean, I have tons. So, you know, get yourself some of those too. That will be extremely helpful. And I'm going to go back to those in a second. Okay, so we talked about, oh, and then the one other thing I wanted to mention too with circle bags specifically is just when you're stitching. So I know some people have problems where they have show through, they have some stitches that show. I think the reason why that happens, that tends to happen more with vinyl than anything, because it doesn't have a lot of give to it. You're putting a lot of stress on your stitches. So also another line of stitching on the inside of your seam allowance can help with that if you're not binding your bag. When you bind your bag, you kind of take care of that. But if you're not binding it, definitely another round of stitching, about like a 1/16 of an inch or even less than that, on the inside of that seam allowance to help take the stress off of the initial stitches you have in there. It would be really helpful. I have a fatigue issue and the binder clips are too tiring for my hand over time. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can see that. You know, it's tough. I deal with some of the same thing too. There's times where I can't even like close my hand, so binder clips are a no-no for me. And that's when I tend to use more tape and glue. And that's the other thing you can do too, is you could put, you know, kind of going back to adhesives for a second, you could also try to put a few spots of like Beacon 3-in-1 glue or something in your seam allowance to try to keep it together. I'll do that only where there's like points in a bag. So if there's like tight corners or anything like that, I might put a spot of glue in there, let it dry, or I use a dry iron to like dry out the glue, and then I will clip and stitch. Okay, so I think stitch length too, you know, just another thing really quickly, stitch length is, you know, I would just, you know, be very mindful of, you know, keeping to a stitch length that makes the most sense for the construction of the bag. But if you are using vinyl, do make sure that your stitch length is a little bit longer, but in general, the smaller the stitch length, the better for curves. I tend to do, even with vinyl, I'm doing like a 3 or a 3.5 millimeter stitch length. That I don't have an industrial machine. Mine's it's a Juki TL18. So this is a quilting straight stitch machine. It's all metal. So it's more of like a heavy duty machine. And so on my machine, 3.5 is what I tend to stitch with. Anything shorter than that, and I get nervous on vinyl specifically that I'm going to stitch too tightly and then the vinyl will eventually rip. So just make sure you're also kind of monitoring that stitch length for yourself. Okay, so, oh, we were going to talk about binding. All right, so on here, I used something that is just called binding tape. So it looks like grosgrain ribbon. That's all. Looks like grosgrain ribbon. It comes in different sizes. These two I got from, Country Brook Design, maybe. But I know Sophisticated carries it, Sophisticated Supplies. You can also get other binding strips from Weft and Warp. And you can actually get, like this other stuff that I like. You can get self-adhesive binding too from Fabric Therapy has it. And again, these are binding strips. So I like to use this for binding. So the reason why I like kind of more of the grosgrain type of binding is it's a little bit thicker than, say, like a cotton woven binding. So you may be used to seeing stuff like this. I think for circle bags, this is probably not enough structure, this cotton woven. It depends on the materials that you're using. If you're using kind of a thicker vinyl, this might be fine. But the binding is really what gives it the structure. So your stitches need to look really nice, but your binding is what's going to give it that really nice shape in the end to reinforce that circle shape. So I like to use, as thick as I can handle with my machine, which I do like this. This has sticky stuff on the back. A Weft and Warp has a self-adhesive binding too, that's right. So check out Weft and Warp. Check out Fabric Therapy. I'm not sure if any others have them, if anybody knows of anyone else that has self-adhesive binding. I think it's really easy to use. The adhesive is only actually in the middle. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this on camera at all. Can you see like kind of that shiny sticky stuff? It's only in the middle, so the outer edges do not have any adhesive. So when you are folding this over onto your bag, I'm gonna pretend like we're binding. Oops. Oh, Soulful Therapy does too. Thank you, Cynthia. I lose track of who has what. I buy from all these shops and I don't remember. So all you're doing is really just folding it over and it sticks, and you're still clipping and then you're stitching. But it's so easy to use. Oh, it's awesome. But yeah. So this is just a really easy way to bind rather than like a traditional quilt binding. It's a lot faster, but it's also a lot thicker. So that's how I got this to be so structured. Yes, my stabilizers absolutely help, but that binding really, really helps to reinforce that shape. So I always recommend that with shape bags, people use binding. And I know not everyone's a fan of binding. I'm actually not either. I don't like it. It's a pain in the neck, but it gives me the shape I want. So therefore, a lot of my patterns advise on binding. So, I mean, look how nice that looks. And it's because I have that structure on the inside right here. Okay? So you can use waterproof canvas. You can, make your own bindings, all of that. I would just say, think about how much structure you need with that seam to get the shape that you want, and play around with what works best for you. But again, I think when you're putting that binding on, I still recommend some heavier duty clips because it's going to be thick to stitch that or to hold it together. Okay. So the last thing I think I wanted to talk about that was on my list was, hold on, I'm zipping this up so I can show you. When you are done, and if it is vinyl, especially if it is vinyl, the one thing that I highly recommend that you do with your bags, if you're not getting really, really tight, seams here, if it's bulging, if it's kind of looking kind of like weird and wavy, grab a hair dryer or a heat gun. Heat gun's a little hot, but grab a hair dryer, heat up your vinyl, heat up your bag, and just use your fingers and really, get into those seams and kind of, roll as much as you can to try to get the shape that you want and really help your bag remember that shape. If you feel like you need a little bit more help, the other thing that you can also do, and you can use any clips for this, just anything that can handle thick seams. These are small spring clamps. Now these hurt my hands, but I will use them. Grab your seam, kind of pinch it, grab your clamp. I know this looks weird. This looks weird. It looks like, you know, we shouldn't be doing it. But if you leave it here for a few minutes, sometimes I will leave it overnight, depending on how thick my bag is, how thick that seam is. But I will either use these or I will use one of these. These aren't as, these are the bigger plastic clips. They don't stay very well, but it depends. It depends on the bag. You might be able to use these, or I will use these, right, on that part, just to kind of keep the shape. So remember, if we heat it up as it's cooling, and you put your clips on as it cools, once it's cooled, you can take them off, and you're gonna have a nice clean edge. Just be careful if you're using this for vinyl. I highly recommend that you put a piece of material on top of this seam first, then clamp it down. So, because the one thing, you know, that it can leave marks. So if you use a little piece of material, something here, it does help. So you don't have as those deep indentations. Those can always come out though, because once everything is already clipped, if you have a few indents, again, grab a hair dryer and kind of, you know, pull that out with the hair dryer. And it should be fine. So I did that with this bag, is kind of how I held it. So hold on, I have things happening on my computer. I hit something. So I did that with this bag. I can't remember if I did it with the front, because this is top stitched. I don't think I did it with that. I know for sure I did it with the back of this, just so I could like get it to kind of keep its shape. But look how nice that is. So it doesn't bulge. I know a lot of people tend to have their, the gussets kind of like bubble and bulge out for them, and it's not as flat. This is how I got it flat. So if that helps at all, especially, and I probably didn't do as good of a job here. This was super thick. I probably need to do it again, but yeah, so you kind of can train your bag into the shape that you're trying to get it to be. Okay, I'm impressed by the hair dryer hint. Why didn't I know that? I don't know, Shelly. I could have sworn you and I talked about that. Maybe not. But yeah, shaping bags with clips. I mean, play around with the different clip styles. See what works best for you. See what you like. I think I got like 100 of these on Amazon. I was intending to use these for my binding. It was a pain in the neck. Oh my gosh. It was so hard to get off. Again, I deal with chronic pain, so maybe it was just me, but I found it hard to get them off, maneuver around. There was too much, but they're great for you know, putting on afterwards, like after your bag's already done. It's fantastic. So that's how I get these shapes. This one I didn't do that with. With something like a cotton canvas like this, I did not have to do anything super extensive to get my round shape in the end. It just did it on its own. I just kind of rolled it with my fingers and I was good, you know? So it really wasn't that big of a deal on this one. My vinyl bags, yes, I tend to have to clip more. Any of my star bags, that kind of stuff, I definitely clip just to kind of get it to behave in the way that I need it to. Okay. Did we cover everything? I know we talked about binding. Was that enough? Are we good? I'm looking to see in the comments if there's anything else. I don't think I see any other comments. All right, just checking. I think I got them all. Oh wait. Oh, I missed something from Jaded. You can't, oh, talking about staples. You can't cut out the staples from the seam allowance. You could, if you're stapling, after you're done, you stitch, you can trim that away if you want. It depends on how you plan to bind. I sometimes have enough room where I can still add my binding and still stitch it. I sometimes use a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So if I'm stapling, I'm only stapling about 1/8 of an inch there, and then I do a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, I don't have enough seam to trim away. But if you do, if you decide to do a larger seam allowance, like a 3/8 of an inch, then yes, you can trim away the staples. Great. Well, I hope that helps. And I hope everyone is, thinking about entering into the Circle Bag Challenge. That's what started this, is I thought, people tend to be intimidated by curves in general. A lot of my patterns have curves. I apologize for them every time, but the bag's pretty, so I want to make it. And yes, it can be a little complicated. And I know people scream at me. So they take practice. So definitely practice with some easy materials. Don't just go jump in on like really thick vinyl to make a curved bag. And play around with it. I still think drawing that seam allowance is going to be your best option at first, just so you can feel good about like where you're stitching. And then the rest of these tips can follow, right? Just to try to keep everything together. And now you know where you're stitching, and you should be pretty much golden at that point. Just take your time. I tend to sew very slowly because I try to get that precision to get the right shape. I don't like to batch sew, not things like this. So they take some time. So if you give it some time, you'll get a really good result. And just practice. That's all. So, but if anything else comes up, you have any other comments or questions, certainly you can comment on this video. Feel free. I try to monitor the comments as people submit them on videos. This will be an archived version of the live, so you can watch it at any time. You can also join my Facebook group, which is K.Azcona Designs Patterns. That link is also in the description. And you can ask all the questions you want there. There are a lot of helpful people within that group. If I'm not getting to the comment, because Facebook doesn't always like me and tell me that there's a comment there, others, tend to chime in, so they can certainly help you with any techniques to help you be successful in your bag making journey. And don't forget, this is a somewhat active YouTube channel. I try to post, tutorials and things, but I'm going to try to do a lot more tips. So if there are other tips that you think would be helpful, and you want to know how I do things, I can even do actual demos. Let me know. Just put them in the comments of any of the videos, and I'll think about, other ways that I can try and help you out. But make sure you like this video, and make sure you subscribe to my channel. When you subscribe, you usually get notified when I post new videos. And, I would say I probably post every month or so at this point. I am also part of the Marathon Society. It is a group of sewists who do sewing marathons once a month. I don't participate every month, but I do when I can, and we sew tons of different patterns. And so you can also learn techniques that way too, and get some really helpful tips and tricks that way. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was helpful. I can't wait to see all of your makes. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Thank you so much for joining. Bye.